what's up you guys? Welcome to my channel. My name is Kylie if you're new, and today, oh yes, I'm gonna be discussing some movies that I found just recently while thrifting. So here are the movies that I'm going to be talking about today. The first one is The Midnight Horror Show. Up next will be The Skeleton Key. Third will be Knowing. And finally, The Haunting in Connecticut. If you're curious about my collection or where I found these movies, I will link my last collection videos down below. So I love thrifting, and basically my goal with this kind of new series that I'm going to do here and there on my channel is that I'm trying to find hidden gems. These were all movies that I'd never heard of before, and I found them either like at Goodwill or on Depop or whatever. And I just took a chance on them because I'd never heard of them, and sometimes that's how you find the best movies. And it's fun because I took a chance on some movies that I wouldn't normally watch, and it's good to branch out and expand your palette. Plus, I totally have an obsession with thrifting. I love thrifting so much, and this is just another excuse to do it. In fact, I'm definitely going to post another collection update in November at some point because I just bought a ton of new movies on Depop, on eBay. I'm definitely going to go thrifting next week, and I got a bunch of stuff sent to me this month. So there will definitely be another large haul coming in the next couple of weeks. Also, this week was supposed to be my review of The Haunting of Bly Manor, but unfortunately, like I've mentioned to you guys several times, your girl has been busy. So that will be coming out next week for sure. I promise you, I am gonna finish that show this weekend because I just finished up with a bunch of midterms and now I have time. Okay, so we're gonna get kicked off here, and there will be timestamps linked down below if you only care about my thoughts on a particular movie, so skip around as you please. But I'm gonna kick it off with The Midnight Horror Show. This movie came out in 2014. It's a super obscure, low-budget movie, so there aren't really any ratings online. But the movie is basically about the Moreau family, a band of twisted misfits who travel around the countryside performing a variety act for unsuspecting audiences. Behind the curtain, shady stuff goes on, etc, etc. Someone's trying to come after them to stop them, you get it. It's a very weird, low-budget British movie, and so I have no idea how this came to be in the Goodwill in Thousand Oaks in California, but here we are. It's honestly really bad. Like, it's so bad. The worst one by far out of all of these, which is why I decided to start with it, because we can only go up from here. But it's so bad that it's almost enjoyable. Do you know what I mean? Not in a campy way necessarily, just in that it's made so poorly and the writing is so bad that you're like, what? The cinematography is also super weird and super amateur. Like, it's objectively poorly shot, but the aesthetic honestly ends up being kind of cool because the movie feels very offbeat. It feels very otherworldly. It definitely transports you because nothing about it feels natural. The cinematography and the lighting is so strange. It creates this entire separate world. And honestly, the aesthetic of it is not that bad. Like, it's poorly made, but it looks kind of cool. I don't know. And honestly, the opening scenes, like the first couple opening scenes, were kind of good, and then it really hooked me, but do not let that fool you. It's terrible. It went so downhill. I don't remember finishing it, actually. It's just really terribly flawed and cliched, and someone online even said that it's the poor man's Devil's Rejects, which I know is a popular Rob Zombie movie. I have not seen that, but I did read the synopsis and it seems very similar. So if you're curious about this storyline at all, I guess just watch Rob Zombie's movie. I don't think this will be for you. I don't think this will really be for anybody. It's pretty bad. But if all these harsh words have made you curious, I'm selling this for like $3 on Depop, so if you want to see what all the anti-hype is about, you may purchase this from me. Honestly, these must be pretty rare though because it's such an obscure movie. There's no way that they're still producing this anywhere. Like, I don't know where else you'd be able to get this online. Anyways, I'm gonna move on to one of the movies that I liked, and that was The Skeleton Key. This came out in 2005, received a 38% on Rotten Tomatoes, and here's what happened. Caroline Ellis, a good-natured nurse living in New Orleans, quits her job at a hospice to work for Violet Devereaux, an elderly woman whose husband Ben is in poor health following a stroke. When Caroline begins to explore the couple's run-down bayou mansion, she discovers strange artifacts and learns the house has a mysterious past. As she continues to investigate, she realizes that Violet is keeping a sinister secret about the cause of Ben's illness. This movie is super random, so I'm not too surprised that I'd never heard of it before, but I kind of am because it stars Kate Hudson, the wildly talented, gorgeous Kate Hudson. But anyways, so this came out smack dab in the middle of the early 2000s, literally in 2005. So it has a lot of the general early 2000s cheesiness, the kind of weird filters that they put on horror movies for some reason, and the semi-bad writing. It's just a very classic early 2000s horror movie. This also stars John Hurt, a famous actor who also played kind of a strangely similar role in Indiana Jones Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, so really not a bad cast. And overall, with their performances and the story itself and this really intriguing plot twist at the end. I actually enjoyed this movie. It's a little bit too long, I would say. I think it could be cut down a little bit, but the pacing is not really bad by any means. There's just some extra stuff in there that's like not really necessary. It's also not really that scary. I did watch it alone late at night, as I try to always do, and there were some moments that gave me the heebie-jeebies that kind of made me wish that I wasn't watching it alone, but I was able to finish it with no problem. I mean, it's not that scary. I already talked about the twist at the end. There are some more predictable plot points and predictable twists throughout the story, but the one at the end has a very unique element to it, and it makes everything else in the movie kind of fall into place and click, and you're like, how did I not see this before? It's genuinely a really good twist. It's not going to become your favorite new movie by any means, but I do think it's definitely worth a one-time watch. Oh, one thing I didn't mention, I think another reason why I did fall for this movie is because I love New Orleans. The culture, the architecture, the people, the drinks, the music, the food. Anyways, so I'm a sucker for literally any movie that's set in New Orleans. I love the swampy South. I honestly love humidity. I know I'm weird for that, trust me. So any movie that has a New Orleans vibe is gonna get me a little bit. But other than that, the storyline and the characters, I think it's a decently well-made movie. Not the most rewatchable, but definitely worth the one-time watch. It's definitely like a B- C+ type of vibe. Okay, moving on to definitively the best movie I'm gonna talk about today, Knowing. Okay. This came out in 2009, received a 33% on Rotten Tomatoes, and here's the synopsis. 50 years after it was buried in a time capsule, a schoolgirl's cryptic document falls into the hands of Caleb Kostler, the son of Professor John Kostler. John figures out that the encoded message accurately lists every major disaster from the past 5 decades and predicts 3 future calamities. 1, a global cataclysm. When his warnings fall on deaf ears, John enlists the help of the prophetic author's daughter and granddaughter to try to avert the ultimate disaster. Okay, so first of all, this movie stars Rose Byrne, who we know and love in Insidious. It also stars Nicolas Cage. Enough said, right? Nick Cage plays this like alcoholic astrophysics professor, and he's totally on the wave of, I'm the cool professor, I'm the cool guy, you know? I think of my students as friends, you know? I'm the cool professor. And that role really could only be pulled off by Nicolas Cage. I mean, it's a little bit goofy, but it's kind of a vibe. I love that for him. Speaking of vibes, this is absolutely a psychological thriller. It's not really a horror movie, and it also kind of has that weird energy that all Nicolas Cage movies have. You know what I'm talking about. That vibe that's just kind of unexplainable, but it's present in literally every movie he's in. That's the one. Because he's a weird dude. All respect though. I love that. Even though this isn't really a horror movie, there are actually some really horrifying moments and some horror elements. I actually might even go so far as to give a trigger warning to people who are sensitive to violent, unnatural death. And I'm not talking about murder, because I know as horror fans, we've seen plenty of murder, but other non-human caused violent, unnatural deaths. There are some really intense sequences in this movie. It gave me a similar anxiety that Mother did, definitely not nearly to the same extent, but I experienced a similar emotional reaction. So just be wary of that if you're sensitive. So along with those kind of traumatic moments, I'll say that there are definitely some horror moments as well. Overall, it's just really suspenseful, and especially in the opening sequence when they're burying the time capsule and everything, I felt like I was watching a horror movie. It's sort of a mixing of the genres of horror and psychological thriller. Sometimes those are kind of one and the same. Not really, but you know what I mean. Or do you? You do. One major element that makes it really suspenseful and makes it feel more like a horror movie to me is this weird whispering that happens off and on for like the entire movie. It'll make sense when you actually watch it. I don't want to explain it for you, but it's very unsettling. It's also technically a sci-fi movie, but even if that's not your thing, it's not overtly sci-fi, I would say. It has its moments. It definitely has its sci-fi moments. But if you're more of a horror fan, I think there's plenty enough elements in there that you'll enjoy. And I'm honestly surprised that it's rated so low, truly, because I loved it. I loved this movie, especially with the sort of twist kind of an ending. I can't get into any of it because I want it to just completely be a surprise for you, but it's like a It's like a gorgeous conspiracy theory come to life. That's the best way I can describe it. It is a little bit depressing. This movie is a little bit depressing, but it's also gorgeous. It's a good story. But anyways, overall thoughts, and then I will move on. It's acted really well. Obviously, I love Miss Rose Byrne. She does her thing. I love Nicolas Cage. I know some people don't like him, but he's such a weirdo and I live for that. Also, the children in this movie really sold me. Literally all of the child actors were excellent in this movie. There's also a great style to this film. I think it's colored really nicely. It's honestly a little bit bleak looking, but that definitely goes with the tone of the movie, so I think it worked and I think it looked really nice. It might not be for everyone, but I think you'd be able to appreciate the artistic style they went with. So I'm genuinely confused about this Rotten Tomatoes score. I think this is 100% a hidden gem, and this is the epitome of why I wanted to start this series on my channel. I had never heard of it. There was a deal where I bought 3 other movies and I got this one for free, and I was like, yeah, no, I'll try it out. 100% worth it. Basically, I'm obsessed with it. I don't know if you'll love it. I don't know if it'll be a horror lover's cup of tea, but I thought it was brilliantly crafted and it was one of the most fascinating stories that I've ever watched. And I'm a sucker for sci-fi. I love the sci-fi elements. Okay. I'm done. Moving on to The Haunting in Connecticut. Coincidentally, both of these movies actually came out in 2009, but The Haunting in Connecticut received a 17% on Rotten Tomatoes, and here's the synopsis. When their son Matt receives a diagnosis of cancer, Sarah and Peter Campbell move to Connecticut to be closer to his doctors. At first, all is well, but then Matt becomes increasingly disturbed by what appears to be paranormal activity. Sarah turns to a priest for help, and the ghosts are seemingly banished. But Matt's condition takes a sudden and unexplained turn for the worse, and the lives of Sarah and the rest of her family are endangered. So this is definitely the most horror-ish movie that I'm going to talk about today. It's a straight up haunting, straight up paranormal movie. And I actually have some fun facts for this one because, get this, it's based on a true story. So this stars Kyle Gallner, who actually starred in the remake of A Nightmare on Elm Street that I talked about last week. It's based on the story featured in the Discovery Channel documentary A Haunting in Connecticut, which I wish I could have gotten my hands on to watch in doing my research for this video, but alas. Ed and Lorraine Warren were actually investigators on this case in real life. The movie is loosely based on the real-life stories of Al and Carmen Snedeker. They lived in a reportedly haunted former funeral home in Southington, Connecticut. The story was first featured in a novel that I cannot remember the name of. It was called In a Dark Place: The Story of a True Haunting, written by Ray Garton. The author who wrote it has actually distanced himself from the family from these stories and the Warrens because he claims that most of the story is actually fiction, and he's basically disowned his own book. What a weirdo. This is also supposedly Jennifer Lawrence's favorite horror movie. And finally, this takes place in Connecticut but was filmed in Canada. Okay, so my thoughts. This movie wasn't totally my cup of tea, but I think that my paranormal horror lovers will actually really like this one. As far as the aesthetic, I personally, again, really loved this one. The color scheme was very much a black and muted yellow, so it kind of felt like a sepia tint vibe. It set a really interesting tone because it made it feel like these modern day characters were kind of stuck in a different decade. And as the haunting progresses and story progresses, you kind of find out that that's sort of what's happening because they're trapped with these spirits of these people from another time, you know what I mean? So the visual story of the coloring helped to contribute to that. I also really enjoyed the performance of Kyle Gallner in this movie, definitely way better than his performance in A Nightmare on Elm Street, which is weird because that movie followed this one the next year, literally the next year. So it's weird that he performed better in this one. The ghosty horror elements and spirits and special effects are alright, they're pretty good. They're nothing amazing, but what I did really like about this movie was the medical room that they found. It was an old funeral home, right? So they have this like embalming table, they have all these old tools to use on dead bodies. It was a very creepy room. I thought the production design of that was immaculate. And yet again, I was watching this alone late at night and I did have to turn it off halfway through because I got too freaked out. Now, watching it during the daytime, it was not scary whatsoever, so I kind of regret that. So keep that in mind if you do want to watch this one, definitely watch it in the right setting. But for my overall thoughts, I thought this movie was just okay. I don't know if it merited a 17%, that feels really low, but it's not anything amazing to write home about. I am definitely going to keep this copy of it though. I do like it enough to eventually rewatch it, maybe in like 10 years or something, but I'm also not going to urge any of you guys to watch this one or The Skeleton Key. I think that they're both worth a one-time watch though, but maybe wait till they're on a streaming service or something, wait till they're free, because I think that both of these movies could potentially kind of have a second life if they are on a streaming service. I think that, you know, we could get people talking about them again, but now's not their time. So don't rush into it, just keep these mental notes in the back of your mind the next time you see one of those on a streaming service. Midnight Horror Show, you already know, just forget about it. It will not be necessary for you to ever think about that movie again in your life, but knowing you need to watch it. Now, for my pure horror fans, might not be for you. I do think there are elements in it that will cater to you. I think that it's worth renting. I think if you need something new to watch, try this one out. Just give it a shot. If you don't like it, I'm really sorry, but you know, that kind of just goes along with trying new things. I know there's gonna be some stinkers when I'm trying out movies that I've never heard of before, but I found an absolute gem. So expand your palette. I highly recommend it. Definitely try it out. But on that note, I am now so pumped to go thrifting again. I am definitely gonna buy more movies that I haven't heard of before. Hopefully next time there will be a horror movie that I become obsessed with, but I'm not mad at all that I found this amazing sci-fi movie. So get out there, go thrifting, see what you can find. And if you do, please let me know. Like, let me know what hidden gems you find if you go thrifting. I think that would be super cool and I'd be really interested to hear about it. But that wraps up my reviews for today. If you haven't already, definitely subscribe over on my vlog channel. I recently posted a video giving tips and tricks on how to grow your following if you're also a fellow horror content creator, or if you're just someone that wants to start YouTube in general. If you'd like to follow me on social media, my Instagram, Twitter, Depop, and Letterboxd are all at Kai Johns. As I mentioned, I'm selling some movies on Depop. You can find Midnight Horror Show on there if you'd like to. Letterboxd is where I talk about movies that I don't intend on reviewing on this channel. Instagram is where I let you guys know what movies I'm watching so you can watch them too, just in case I do a review of them soon. Twitter is for whatever I want it to be for. It can kind of be a mess, to be honest. But as always, check out the petitions and the GoFundMe's links down below. I update those every single week. I hope that you enjoyed this video and I hope I got you in the next one. Bye!